Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 18th, 2022, and today we are going to be taking a look at the November Senate elections. In just a few months, we will find out who will control the U.S. Senate, and it will be determined in many close races. The upcoming Senate elections are of the most competitive that we have seen in the entirety of the 21st century. The current Senate control is 50-50, with the Democrats being in the advantage due to Vice President Kamala Harris breaking that tie. Right now, the Democratic Party is defending a very similar amount of seats that the Republican Party is defending. And overall, this Senate map is quite beneficial for the Democratic Party in the aspect that they aren't going to be defending any unfamiliar territory, but it will still be very competitive. The Republican Party, on the other hand, only has to pick up just one seat. For reference, back in 2018, they picked up 2, in 2014, they picked up 9, and in 2010, they picked up 7. So for 2022, the Republican Party only needs to do slightly better than they have in previous elections. But I can't say that that's going to come easy. Based off of where we are right now, the FiveThirtyEight average gives the Republican Party and the Democratic Party about an equal chance at victory. I've already told you how in historical elections, 2010, 2014, 2018, blue and red wave years, the Republican Party has lucked out, at least when it comes down to the U.S. Senate. One year, they're winning control of the U.S. Senate. The other, they're winning 7 seats in the state, across the states. And in the most recent one, again, a blue wave, that 2 advancement in the U.S. Senate was quite impressive, to say the least, for the Republican Party. Even though the map itself was very lopsided in favor of them, I can't say that that's something that typically is done by an incumbent party during a midterm election year. But the Democrats might be similar to the Republicans in that regard. Considering that they have about a 1 in 2 chance at retaining control of the U.S. Senate, Democrats are doing well, especially considering that our Senate majority isn't anywhere near where it was. Looking at the margin here for Democrats or Republicans from any time either party has had an advantage in the 21st century, except for in the year 2000. This is the closest Senate majority in over 20 years. So now that we're in a position where in the closest Senate majority, a 50-50 tie and about a 50-50 odds, every single race matters. Every single bit of candidacy, candidate quality, polling numbers, fundraising numbers, etc. All of that matters for the upcoming midterms because, quite frankly, everything is going to be close, at least for the states that we know are going to be competitive. Taking a look at our Senate map, even though there are going to be many competitive states, we do have a good amount of states that are already going to be decided by a pretty solid margin. Now, the safe blue characterization is typically only reserved for states that we know how they're going to go, and we expect to vote for their incumbent party or their respective parties by about 15 points plus. So, for instance, in the state of New York, right now we're expecting about a 20 to 25 point victory there for the incumbent senator, Chuck Schumer, the Senate majority leader. He will probably win by a margin similar to that, which is why we have it in the safe column. Republicans might have a candidate, they might be trying to contest it, but realistically, they aren't going to do much damage to the Democratic Party in a state that is so heavily lopsided in favor of them. The same thing goes for the GOP. They have a bunch of their own states that we can characterize as safe. Some Republicans, some independents, some Democrats are saying, look at Utah. Incumbent Republican Mike Lee is facing off against an independent. Democrats chose not to nominate someone within this race, so Utah might become competitive. Polls seem to suggest that it's narrower than 20 points. For reference, Senate elections in Utah are typically won by 30, 40, sometimes even 50 points in favor of the GOP. So to see it narrowed down to beneath 20, especially amongst reputable pollsters, some Republicans, or really anyone, are saying, take a look at the state, it might become competitive, but realistically, especially on my end, especially where we are nationally speaking for the generic ballot, with Republicans up about 2 points nationwide, I don't expect a state that voted for Trump by 20 points to be that competitive. It might be, it might shock us all, but at the end of the day, the Republican Party absolutely has the upper hand in the state of Utah, and I would 100% defend where I am right now with a safe Republican characterization. North and South Dakota, safe Republican states. No one is really contesting that. Kansas. Oklahoma has 2 elections. If you're wondering why I had to fill in 2 things in Oklahoma, there was a resignation from a U.S. senator in the state of Oklahoma. Not a resignation, but an intent to retire. So once that seat is vacated, once that seat is filled in November, that senator will be allowing whoever wins this race to fill the remainder of their term. Regardless of the race, though, both of them are characterized as safe Republican. Oklahoma is one of the most conservative states in the nation. This shouldn't surprise really anyone. Arkansas, Louisiana, Kentucky, Indiana, all safe red states. Now, the interesting thing about Kentucky is that Charles Booker is running against Rand Paul. Now, some Democrats seem to believe that Kentucky is going to be competitive. Realistically, it isn't going to be. Rand Paul is probably going to win by 20 plus points. But Rand Paul does underperform national Republicans. Back in 2016, Rand Paul actually only won the Senate race there by about 15 points. Now, 15 points might be impressive in a swing state, but in a safe red state that voted for Trump by 30 voting for Rand Paul by 15, there's a significant reduction of voters there that voted for Trump that were unwilling to vote for Rand Paul in the Senate election. Now that we're heading around to 2022, even if there is that bit of apprehensiveness from some of the Republicans in Kentucky, at the end of the day, Rand Paul is still likely to win re-election. He comes from a very conservative state, and it isn't going to be competitive as much as some Democrats might hope that it would be. Indiana used to be competitive back in 2016. That no longer is the case. Missouri as well. The reason why I left Missouri up in the air for just a moment is because I wanted to briefly talk about what is actually happening within this state. The state of Missouri is really a very Republican state, but right now there seems to be some level of competitiveness slightly depending on who the Republicans decide to nominate. Let's take a look quickly at the polls in Missouri. I don't want to get too bit off track, but I do think that it is worth talking about because you might see it narrow up depending on who they choose for the Republican nomination. What you see here is a lot of red. You see a lot of Republicans ahead in almost all of these matchups, and you find that largely because Republicans just have an advantage in Missouri. But there's one Republican in specific who seems to be underperforming the rest when it comes down to polls from Remington Research, Survey USA, Trafalgar Group, whoever it might be. Some of these polls are telling you that, hey, this Republican nominee seems to be underperforming practically every other one. And that is Republican Eric Greitens. He is the former governor of the state of Missouri, had to resign amidst allegations. In addition to that, he was never meant to run for office again. He could have ran for his own position back in 2020. He wasn't impeached. He wasn't convicted by the Missouri State Senate or Missouri State House. He wasn't forced out of his office more than he decided to leave due to his high levels of unpopularity. But he decided to re-enter into politics, not as a representative, but instead as someone running for U.S. Senate. And right now, he actually leads the primary polls across the state. But the problem is that his electability has been called into question by polls done by some very reputable pollsters, at least within the state of Missouri. Some of them even showing him in a tie with a potential Democratic nominee. Should Republicans choose him as the nominee, 538 seems to be confident that he's going to win, and I also am confident that he will win, just where we are nationally speaking. But if this was any other type of year, or even a 2018 type of year, Republicans nominating Eric Greitens probably would not have been the best move and probably would have resulted in a very competitive race. But considering where we are nationally, where Biden is nationally, where Republicans are, we can consider Missouri to still be a safe red state. I also have a bit more confidence in the Republican Party there to prevent Greitens from becoming the nominee, but there is also no guarantee of that because we have to wait on the voters and their ultimate determination in their upcoming primary. The next state we are talking about is the state of Iowa. Now, Iowa has actually seen some new poll out of the state that shows the race to be slightly competitive. It shows about an 8-point margin between the Republican and the Democrat. Now, Chuck Grassley being at an 8-point lead, whereas Kim Reynolds, the Republican, is at a 17-point lead, is very telling about the state of the race in the state of Iowa. Now, Chuck Grassley being at 47% puts him in the worst position since the beginning of his electoral history in the state of Iowa. Not a single poll ever done on any one of his Senate races from 1980 to 86 to 92 to 98 to 2004 to 2010 to 2016 had ever shown him below 50. And now that's exactly what this poll did. Now this poll comes from Seltzer and Company. And the reason why that is important is because they are the most accurate pollster from 2016 and 2020. Now they're saying Chuck Grassley defeats Michael Franken by about 8 points. 8 points is not necessarily that impressive when Chuck Grassley won in 2016 by 25 points. The problem for voters here? Old age. Chuck Grassley has been serving in some capacity in Iowa since his 20s, has been in politics for a third of the state's entire history, and voters don't seem to be taking too kindly to that. Now, for right now, Michael Franken's number at 39% is what I would call the most alarming. Chuck Grassley's on the Republican side being only at 47%, I would slightly agree as alarming, but it's still a lead regardless. Until I get more data and see more numbers out of the state that suggest that the race is as close as 8 points might be suggesting, for right now I'm still going to characterize it at about a 15-plus point margin, maybe 15 to 16 points. 538 also agrees with me on that regard, but I can't say that there is no consideration that the race might become more competitive. These new polls have suggested and swung the light model here to about a 12% chance of victory for Michael Franken and an expected margin here of about 10 points. Nothing I would say that really shows the Democratic Party in a super high amount or chance at victory in Iowa, but still something to think about and still something that might sway a different characterization in the immediate future. For Alabama and South Carolina, no real consideration there that the Democrats are going to win, even though Doug Jones did win in Alabama in 2017. That simply isn't going to be happening this time around. So now in our remaining 45 to 45 tie yet again. I mean, I'm telling you, this is how close our Senate elections are. You're ending up with very similar numbers. You're ending up with very similar safe and solid states. It's just the way the American public is tending to vote this time around. You have about 10 toss-up seats. Now, not all of these are going to be true toss-ups. Some of these are going to be the states that we decide by likely margins, that Republicans and Democrats win from anywhere between 5 and 15 percentage points. And these are states that you normally would think about as potentially speaking solid states for their respective parties, except the margins are narrower enough that they could become competitive in the immediate future, or something might make them more competitive this time around. One example would be the state of Colorado. It's a state that voted for Biden by about 14 points. We are confident that Michael Bennet is going to win the state of Colorado, but I can't say that we expect him to win by more than 15. This really just is a determination about margin, and also can really just connect into the chance of victory here. If a Republican is ahead by 10 points, chances are they're going to win that race, but it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that Democrats do win. But if we're projecting that Republicans win, for instance, Idaho by 40 points, Democrats have absolutely no chance at winning that Senate race. And it's the same thing when you're taking a look at some of these characterizations. So we'll kick it off with Colorado being a likely blue state. Michael Bennet ran for president, ran for Congress, ran for Senate in 2010, 2016, survived twice. In addition to that, I will say that looking at his 2022 numbers, his approval rating is high. Republicans did choose the right nominee, but I can't say that Colorado was as competitive as it was in the past. When you take a look at the presidential election results, again, Joe Biden won the state by 14 points. It's a bit difficult to see. And even if you swing, for instance, Colorado as much as Virginia swung in the 2021 election to Glenn Youngkin, Colorado still remains blue. This time, though, they have an incumbent, a popular one at that. I can't say I'm expecting Democrats to lose the state of Colorado, thus it's likely Democratic characterization. As for the Republicans, they have some of their own likely states. In fact, they have 3. The first one being Ohio. Now, J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan have been in a slightly more competitive race than people had envisioned for the state. The state of Ohio went to President Trump by 8 points in 2016, again in 2020. But in 2022, J.D. Vance doesn't seem to be the strongest nominee for U.S. Senate in the state of Ohio. Now, Tim Ryan is an incumbent U.S. representative. He has represented a swing district for quite some time now and has narrowed up in his margin, getting closer and closer to 2020. But he still has won in a district that has a partisan lean of about Democrat +1. That's not exactly something that means that he should be winning in red and blue waves, yet he absolutely is. In the state of Ohio right now, he has about a 16% chance of victory. I think this is enough to characterize the state as a likely red state. Tim Ryan, surprisingly enough, has been leading in a lot of the preliminary polls that we have seen across the states. Ohio seems to show Tim Ryan ahead by 2 points. I think this is going to be one of the biggest polling errors of 2022 should it continue, because we know, at least expect, the state of Iowa to be a state that goes to the Democratic Party, to the Republican Party, I'm misspeaking there, to the Republican Party by about 8 to 10 points. I stand by that. I think J.D. Vance is going to win the state of Ohio. It is possible that Tim Ryan does narrow it up, but I can't say it's likely. For right now, I'm keeping it where I've characterized it for the past couple of months. Moving over to the next state I'm going to characterize as likely, we have the state of Florida. Now, Marco Rubio has been popular in Florida ever since he has been elected. He won in 2010, he won in 2016, and he is absolutely on track to win again in 2022. Now, Florida is a state you might normally characterize as a swing state, normally characterized as close. But in 2016, Marco Rubio won by 8, on the same ballot that Trump only won by 1. As Florida has become more conservative, as Republicans have overtaken Democrats in the voter registration across the state, it's only going to benefit Marco Rubio. The projected margin of victory here is about 12 points across the state, and I think that makes sense. Accompanied by a very strong Republican nominee on the governor's side, overall, Florida is going to be a likely red state, and I've characterized it as such for the entirety of my 2022 midterm election projections. Then moving over to the final state we are going to characterize as likely across this entire map, and we have the state of North Carolina. Now, Republicans made the right choice. Rather, Donald Trump made the right choice by choosing Representative Ted Budd to be the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in the state of North Carolina. Now, for a brief period of time, North Carolina could have become competitive. And what I mean by that is the fact that Pat McCrory, the former governor who lost in 2020 despite Trump winning the state in 2020, lost in 2016 despite Trump winning it in 2016 as well, he decided to run for Senate. He was the front runner, very similarly to Eric Greitens, except this time, Donald Trump made an endorsement early. Now, Trump's endorsement didn't initially have a super impactful effect. In fact, Ted Budd only went to about third, sometimes second place in polls following the race. But after a year of the Trump endorsement, that's when Ted Budd's name started to gain recognition. In addition to other top Republicans endorsing him, they knew that he would be the most electable choice for North Carolina, and I stand by that. Sherry Beasley is a strong Democratic nominee, but this simply isn't her year. Even in 2016, North Carolina's Senate race went to the GOP by about 6 points statewide. I think that for 2022, it will go by a similar margin to Ted Budd, even if some other states are going to be more competitive than North Carolina. History benefits the Republicans in North Carolina, election results, whatever it might be, party registration, etc., everything seems to be benefiting the GOP in North Carolina, and I stand by this likely Republican characterization. But for the final remaining 6 states, these are all states that really could go either way. On one hand, Republicans could lose some of these states. Democrats could also lose some of them. Republicans could be at 54 to 46. Democrats could be at 52 to 48, depending on how some of these states swing and the future of Biden's approval, the generic ballot, and the candidate quality within these races, because not all of these states have finalized their primaries. For instance, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Arizona. But we have a general idea of who is going to be the nominees. We already have some. Dr. Oz on the GOP side in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman on the Democratic side, Herschel Walker in Georgia for the GOP, Raphael Warnock for the Democrats in Georgia. Nevada, Adam Laxalt for the GOP, Catherine Cortez Masto for the Democrats. But for the other 3 states, Wisconsin, Arizona, and New Hampshire, you have 3 incumbents, 1 Republican in Wisconsin, 2 Democrats in Arizona and New Hampshire, but we don't know exactly who's going to win these nominations because it could become more competitive. But at the end of the day, we have a general idea, and we can make a determination based off of said general idea. So let's go ahead and get started. The first state we're going to characterize is a Democratic state. This is the state of New Hampshire. The state of New Hampshire could have been an easy and practically automatic pickup for the GOP had they nominated Chris Sununu, but they didn't because Chris Sununu decided he didn't want to run for Senate. Maggie Hassan is a strong candidate. She defeated Kelly Ayotte, someone who had won in 2010 with over 60% of the vote, defeated her in an election where practically every other down-ballot Democrat seemed to do worse than Hillary Clinton in the U.S. Senate elections. That wasn't the case in the state of New Hampshire by a mile stretch. Looking at Maggie Hassan's margin, it was narrower by 0.1, but in some states, for instance, in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, the underperformance for the down-ballot Democrat was similar to 2 to 3 points across these states, not anywhere near 0.1%. In addition to that, it was still a Democratic victory. Despite Clinton barely winning New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan was still able to defeat a Republican incumbent. If anything, we would have expected New Hampshire's Senate election to go red and the presidential election for it to go blue. But in fact, Democrats won both. I think in 2022, especially considering the Republican Party's disarray when it comes down to choosing the right nominee and also the right values and priorities for the Republican Party in 2022, I can't imagine that Maggie Hassan is losing at this point in time, but it definitely could go to the GOP should things get slightly better for them nationally and statewide. Moving over to the next state we're going to characterize, we have the state of Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania has been a lean blue state ever since recently, and that's because I don't think the Republican nominee, Dr. Oz, is the strongest one possible. I mean, I tell people all the time, Dr. Oz could become a U.S. Senator, and people are fascinated by that because nobody expected him to ever enter into electoral politics. Now, he's from the state of New Jersey. He moved to Pennsylvania to run in the Senate election, and that's not a biased statement to say. It's 100% factual. And that's something that the Democrat, John Fetterman, has been vehemently attacking him for, and it seems to be working. Looking at the state of Pennsylvania right now, Dr. Oz hasn't led in a single poll. And it isn't just polling numbers that are telling me this, it's also the fundraising numbers. And it also is the fact that Oz is going to be bogged down and weighed down by Doug Mastriano, the GOP's candidate for governor, someone who is a huge election denier, and also one of the most extreme Republican politicians we have seen across the nation. Pennsylvania just isn't going right in the right direction for the GOP, and for right now, I'm characterizing it as lean Democrat. But Republicans have their own lean state in the Rust Belt, and that is the state of Wisconsin. Now, Ron Johnson is unpopular. He's the incumbent Republican senator going for a 3rd term, but here's the thing. Unpopularity has never really mattered to Ron Johnson. He wasn't exactly the most favored in 2010 before he entered into the U.S. Senate, was very unpopular in 2016 when he won about 3 points, even though Trump won the state by less than a point. And then in 2022, he seems to be doing mildly well. I would also say that Democrats haven't made a decision. Similar to Republicans in New Hampshire, Mandela Barnes seemed to have been the clear and prioritized Democratic nominee in that Senate race, but he simply isn't. They are still fighting for that nomination spot, and we will see what happens. For right now, Wisconsin remains a lean red state. They have the incumbency status. They also have someone who can withstand low approvals and outperform where President Trump was in 2016 and likely again in 2020. and it also is just the national numbers. Democrats don't exactly have this nominee that is going to entirely shake up the race, and they also don't have a Republican nominee that is as poor for them as Blake Masters in Arizona, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, or Herschel Walker in Georgia. Democrats don't exactly have someone, I would say, that also is similar to some of these other Democratic nominees. So we will see what happens. It really depends on who the nominees are. But for right now, I won't say that the Democratic Party is the favorite to win Wisconsin, even though maybe over a year ago, I might have agreed with that sentiment. In the final three remaining states, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, they all share a similar thing. They are across the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt region is a region of the United States that extends from California all the way up to North Carolina, a region of the United States that the Democratic Party has been heavily targeting. It includes some states that are not exactly included in this toss-up column: North Carolina, Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado. But I will say that it is going to be extremely important because for right now, the Rust Belt is at odds. Wisconsin's going red, but Pennsylvania is going blue. We will see what happens amongst these three remaining states. Now, we'll start off on the West Coast because that's how I want to go ahead and end off this video. But for the state of Nevada, I would first like to say that the Democratic Party can still win here. But Adam Laxalt is a very good GOP nominee. I'm impressed, at least by the nomination of Adam Laxalt to the U.S. Senate election in the state of Nevada. Nevada could have had a worse Republican nominee for U.S. Senate, and they simply rejected them. In addition to that, Adam Laxalt is someone whose name is recognized across the state, has served as the Attorney General across the state, and this year is going to be a lot better for Republicans, in addition to the fact that there seems to be a movement from Hispanic voters away from the Democratic Party that might be exemplified by 2022. For Nevada, I'm comfortable characterizing this state for the first time in a while as a lean red state on our Senate map. You take a look at a little bit of LTE history when it comes down to my characterizations of these states. Nevada hasn't been a lean red state since April of 2022. The last time I had it in the Republican column was in early May, and now it's back. Republicans are probably going to win Nevada, at least as it stands right now, and I think they will do so by a lean margin. But in neighboring Arizona, I think Arizona will go to Mark Kelly by a lean margin as well. I can't say Blake Masters is the best nominee the GOP could put forth. Now, he hasn't officially won the nomination. Mark Brnovich is still vying for that race. But realistically, Blake Masters has the endorsement from Trump. He's leading on his own and also is going to be pushed ahead by voters that believe that Mark Brnovich aided in the election of President Biden. The 2020 election has become a center front issue for Arizona politics, whether the governor election or the Senate election. When it comes down to the 2022 Senate election, you are seeing this race really come down between Trump Republicans and establishment Republicans. Except this time, the Trump Republicans are doing very, very well. But that helps Mark Kelly because Arizona voters rejected Trump in 2018. They rejected him again in 2020. And they only went to him by 3.5 in a year where every other state was swinging to the right. Arizona shifted to the Democrats by about 6 points statewide. Again, a Romney loss versus a Trump victory, yet Arizona got significantly bluer. I think that the same thing could happen with Blake Masters as the nominee, even with our national numbers all benefiting the GOP. It comes down to individual states. It comes down to candidate quality, and I can't say that the Republican Party has the best chance with Blake Masters as their nominee. And in the final state that I'm going to characterize, we have the state of Georgia. Now, Georgia is a state where I'm a bit apprehensive about because in other election predictions, I've had it as red. I've had it as red for quite some time, dating all the way back to before the November election in August of 2021. But now, I think Democrats are going to win Georgia. Herschel Walker has not impressed me. He has made a bunch of statements and gaffes that I think will weigh him down in the state of Georgia. In addition to that, we aren't exactly seeing the same party line vote that we expected for 2022 in the governor election and in the Senate election. In almost every single poll, in fact, maybe every single one that we've seen from the state of Georgia, the Republicans are winning the governor election and Democrats are winning the Senate election. Even some Republican internals have suggested this. And that's because Stacey Abrams isn't seemingly as strong of a candidate as Herschel Walker. In addition to that, Walker, just his level of popularity and incumbency status seems to be helping him the most. Now, Georgia could still end up going to the GOP. I don't doubt that. But for right now, I'm not comfortable saying that Herschel Walker is going to defeat Raphael Warnock in a state where that really just doesn't make sense right now, looking at the numbers, looking at the approvals, and looking at where the other coinciding race, the governor election, is directed. Right now, I would say Raphael Warnock wins the state of Georgia narrowly, a lean margin, but still a margin enough to keep him in control and keep the Democratic Party in control of the U.S. Senate following the upcoming November elections. So in this final map, Democrats and Republicans are back to their tie. Vice President Kamala Harris would break said tie. Democrats lose the state of Nevada, but maintain it with their pickup in the state of Pennsylvania. It's a 50-50 map. Democrats, Republicans, extremely competitive across 6 main competitive seats. We will see what happens. They could go in any direction, but right now, I believe the Democratic Party will maintain control of the U.S. Senate, but a lot can change between now and November. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.